God has been giving me a lot of opportunities to talk to people who don't believe in God about the reliability of the New Testament. Let's face it, the New Testament is quite foundational to believing in Jesus. If we don't believe the New Testament texts that talk about Jesus, then we're not going to believe in Jesus himself. However, to do that would be to commit intellectual suicide, because we have more information on the existence of Jesus than we do with many other historical figures of the first century. Anyway, people say that the Bible, the New Testament specifically, is unreliable. Why do they say that? Because it has been copied and copied and copied and copied through the past 2,000 years, the past 20 centuries. We don't have the original text of the New Testament, but we have 20,000 plus manuscripts. Now, what is a manuscript? It is simply a copy of the original, and people did this through the years, specifically scribes. They would copy the text and they would pass it on, and when that text would begin to break down, because what they had back then did not hold up very well, and the text that it was written on would break down, not the actual, the construction of the wording and everything, but the material that it was written on would break down. So they would have to copy, and so that is what would happen. Over the decades, over the centuries, they would have to recopy and recopy and recopy. While we have over 20,000 plus copies of the original text. And a lot of people will say, well, that just proves my point, because it's different than what it was then. Well, that is actually false. We have 20,000, I believe 25,000 New Testament manuscripts written in over a dozen different languages, found in several different geographical locations over the Mediterranean era and Asia Minor, as well as Northern Africa. And all of these texts, they do have errors. That is certain. They have very minor grammatical errors, spelling errors, and punctuation errors. But these errors are so minor because they do not affect the overall meaning of the text. It's not like, oh, I like, Sally, when it actually says I like Bill. There's a difference there, because one is speaking of a man versus one speaking of a woman. That's a big difference in the text. We don't have any of that. The difference is so minor, and it's not something that corrupts the entire text. We still understand what the text is talking about, and we have trust in the reliability because of the number of manuscripts. So we have a vast amount of manuscripts, tens of thousands, and with that come a lot of errors, but these are very minor errors. In fact, the New Testament has more errors than any other piece of literature, but we also have more information to support the reliability of it. So this is called corroboration. Since we have numerous copies, we have better corroboration, because we can look at every text that we have and say, does this say the same thing in John 3:16? Does John 3:16 say the same thing in John 3:16 here and John 3:16 there? But not only do we have copies and copies and copies, we have copies and copies and copies written in the 3rd century AD, and the 5th century AD, and the 8th century AD, and 10 AD. So we have these texts written throughout the centuries in different geographical locations, in different languages, and they all are saying the same exact thing with very minor punctuation, grammatical, and textual variations that do not corrupt or alter the meaning of the text. John 3:16 says John 3:16 in 1st century, 3rd century, 8th century, 10th century, 12th century AD in various languages: Syriac, Coptic, Gothic, Latin languages. They all are saying the same thing. So when people say to you, the Bible is not reliable, we can't trust it because what we have today is different than what we had 2,000 years ago, these people are arguing either out of willful ignorance or uninformed ignorance, because it is not true. What we have in the New Testament is extremely accurate. We do have a lot more errors than other pieces of literature from this time, but that is because we have tens of thousands, literally, more evidence, more manuscripts than other pieces of literature. Caesar's Gallic Wars, the writings of Josephus or Tacitus, or other contemporary writers of the 1st century, they have 10, 20, 30, or a few hundred manuscripts that confirm their legitimacy. And secular scholars will use these writers, and they will use them with confidence because they trust in them, because they have dozens or hundreds of manuscripts that support their work. The Bible has not tens, not hundreds, but tens of thousands of manuscripts that support it, and they're written in various different languages, over various different geographical locations, over various different eras of human existence. And we can have very concrete confidence in this. And I encourage all of you, I challenge any of you who are watching this and don't believe that the Bible is accurate, that don't believe that the Bible was copied with care, and that what we have today is the same as what it was then. I challenge you to do some studying, because you will not find evidence to refute what I am saying. And there are many scholars and theologians and historians who were liberal in their thinking, who denied the existence of Jesus, who denied the legitimacy of the New Testament, and came to faith in Jesus Christ because they studied and realized that the New Testament has a lot of weight because of the amount of evidence. And a true scholar, a true seeker of evidence, is going to look for the evidence, and they're going to find the truth. And the truth will be eye-opening to you. They don't teach you this in school. They don't teach you this in college because it's very inconvenient to us. It's much more easy to be willfully ignorant, or just ignorant of the evidence because we don't know, and live life as if the Bible's just a fairy tale. But the Bible is not a fairy tale, my friends, my guys. The Bible is not a fairy tale, my friends. It is not. There is evidence. There's concrete evidence. And we can have assurance in it. And this is just a very small piece of evidence in the vast array of evidence that we have for the biblical puzzle that confirms that the Bible is true, that God is real, and that Jesus Christ is alive. Whoever confesses that Jesus Christ is Lord and believes that God raised him from the dead will be saved. You are loved.